Montana Territory, late October, 1887. The first snow had just begun to fall when the woman in white collapsed on his cabin porch, her wedding dress torn and muddied, her breath ragged in the cold mountain air. Thatcher Tolliver barely had time to set down his rifle before he was at her side. "Ma'am," he said, crouching low, brushing snow from her damp cheek. Her lips were blue. She was shivering so hard her teeth barely let the words out. "Please, do not let them find me." Her eyes fluttered closed. Thatcher scooped her up without a second thought, carried her through his cabin door, and kicked it shut behind him. His fire was already burning strong. He had just come in from chopping wood when he saw her, and he laid her down on the bearskin near the hearth. Her boots were missing. Her stockinged feet were red with cold. He pulled a wool blanket from the cot and wrapped it around her, then grabbed another for good measure. She looked young, maybe 22 or 23. Her hair was dark and tangled, pinned with what was left of a crushed white rose. Her hands were scraped, one of them bleeding. He knelt by her. "Can you hear me?" Her lashes fluttered again. "Do not take me back." "I am not taking you anywhere," he said gently. "You are safe now." She blinked up at him. "Where am I?" "My cabin. About 30 miles south of Helena." Her breath caught. "I ran farther than I thought." "What is your name?" "Zadie," she whispered. "Zadie Northwood." He nodded. "I am Thatcher Tolliver." Her eyes drifted to the fire, then back to his face. "You live here alone?" He gave a short nod. "By choice." Zadie's shoulders sagged like something inside her finally let go. "I was going to be married today. I figured." He glanced at the ruined dress. "But you ran." She gave the smallest nod and a tear slid down her cheek. "I had to." Thatcher stood. "You need warm clothes." "I will find something." In the back, he dug through a chest and came up with a flannel shirt and an old pair of wool pants with a drawstring waist. When he came back, she was trying to sit up and he helped her gently, careful not to startle her. "I will turn my back," he said, setting the clothes beside her. When he turned again, she was in his clothes, her feet tucked beneath her. The shirt hung on her and the pants were bunched at the ankles, but she looked warmer. A bit more color had returned to her face. "I do not know how to thank you," she said quietly. "Do not worry about that yet." He knelt by the hearth and added another log. "Hungry?" She hesitated, then nodded. Thatcher poured stew into a tin bowl and handed it to her with a spoon. She gripped it with both hands like it was gold, blowing on the steam before taking small bites. He sat across from her, letting the fire do the talking for a while. Only when she had finished the bowl and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand did she speak again. "He was not a good man." Thatcher looked over. "The man they made me marry. My father owed him money. That was the price. I did not know the full truth until this morning." "What did you find out?" Zadie's eyes stayed on the fire. "He beat his last wife. She did not survive." Thatcher's jaw clenched. "How did you get away?" "I waited until the carriage was half a mile from the church. We had stopped because a wheel came loose. I ran into the woods. I think they came after me. I just kept running." Thatcher stared at her for a long moment. "You were safe here. No one comes this way." She looked at him then, really looked. "Why are you out here?" He hesitated, but something about her made it easy to answer. "Used to ride with the cavalry. Saw too much. Lost too much. Came out here 2 years ago, built this place with my own hands. Been quiet ever since." Zadie held his gaze. "Is it lonely?" "Sometimes." She gave a small nod. "I would rather be lonely than trapped." The fire cracked between them. Outside, snow kept falling. He stood and pulled down a quilt from the shelf. "You can take the bed. I will sleep out here." Zadie's brows lifted. "Are you always this kind to strangers?" "No, just you." She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "Thank you, Mr. Tolliver. Call me Thatcher." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, Thatcher." He met her eyes for a long moment. Then he turned and busied himself with clearing the plates. By the time he came back, she was already asleep in his bed, curled beneath the quilt like she had lived there all her life. Thatcher sat in his old rocking chair, watching the snow pile outside the window. There was something about her, the way she had run, the fire in her voice, the way she held herself even when scared. She was not just running from a man. She was running toward her own freedom. And somehow, she had landed here on his porch, in his arms, beneath his roof. He did not know what would come next. But he knew one thing clearly, like the crackle of the fire or the weight of the rifle behind the door. He would protect her, no matter what came. Morning came slow and silver. Light filtered through the frost-laced window panes, casting pale lines across the cabin floor. Zadie stirred beneath the quilt, the scent of cedar smoke and something warm drawing her from sleep. Thatcher stood by the stove, sleeves rolled to the elbow, stirring cornmeal into a kettle. He didn't look over when she rose. Her steps were light, but the floor gave her away. She crossed the room quietly, hugging the flannel shirt closer. "You're up early. I don't sleep heavy." He ladled mush into 2 bowls. "Hope you like it plain. I like anything that's hot and not stolen." He handed her a bowl and gestured toward the chair near the window. She settled in, glancing outside. The world was white, snow layered on the pine branches like icing. A doe picked her way through the trees, head lifting at a distant sound before vanishing behind a rise. She ate carefully, eyes on the animal tracks that crisscrossed the clearing. "You don't keep livestock," she said after a while. "Too much trouble this high up." He sipped from a tin cup. "I trade into Helena once a month." "Do you ever miss people?" No, he didn't say it cruelly, just as fact. Then, after a pause, "Though I suppose I made an exception yesterday." Zadie smiled faintly and turned back to the window. He watched her, noted how different she looked in the light. The bruised look around her eyes had faded some. Her hands still bore the scrapes, but they were cleaner now, wrapped in fresh linen. She kept her gaze steady, but there was a weariness in it that hadn't come from one night's cold. "You said your father owed him money," Thatcher said after a long silence. Zadie set her bowl down. "Yes. Gambling. He lost the mill 2 winters ago. Then the land. We'd been living with my aunt in Deer Lodge, and he came back from Butte with a deal. Said it was the only way to save our name." She brushed a thumb along her palm. "I didn't know what kind of man he was until the tailor's girl told me. She used to tend to his first wife after the bruises. No one ever said a word about it while she was alive." Thatcher's jaw shifted. "People see what they want to." "I know." Her voice was low. "I think my father did too." Outside, a raven called once and flew low over the roof. "You think they'll come looking?" he asked. "They might." She traced a knot in the wood of the table. "But I took the money from his coat pocket. Not all of it, just enough to make it look like I meant to run far. He'll assume I'm headed south, maybe Salt Lake." "You're clever." "I had to be." Thatcher stood, pulled a pair of worn boots from under the cot. "These might fit. Not sure they'll be kind to your feet, but better than stockings." She took them with a nod and tried them on. They were wide, but not unmanageable. "I should help," she said, standing. "You've given me shelter, food. Let me work for it. I didn't ask for anything." "You didn't have to." She met his eyes. "I want to." He studied her a moment, then nodded toward the woodpile. "We'll need more chopped. Axe is out back." She took the coat he offered and stepped outside into the cold. He watched through the window as she tested the weight of the axe, adjusted her stance, and struck. Her swing was unpracticed, but determined. By midday, she had stacked a neat row by the wall. Her cheeks were red from the wind, strands of hair sticking to her temple. They ate in silence, the fire snapping behind them. "You ever think of leaving here?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "But I've got no place I need to be." "What about family?" "Gone," he said simply. "Brothers died in the war. Folks before that." She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into a small drawer near the hearth and pulled out a deck of cards. "You play." She lifted a brow. "You offering to lose?" He gave the faintest grin. "Try me." They played long after the light faded, a single lantern between them. She beat him twice, then he won the next 3. Her laugh, low and surprised, filled the cabin once when he laid down a run she hadn't seen coming. When the fire burned low, she stood and stretched. I should sleep. He nodded toward the cot. I'll take the floor tonight. She hesitated. You sure? I've had worse. She watched him for a moment, something unreadable passing across her face. Then she turned without a word and disappeared behind the curtain. Thatcher lay on the floor, hands behind his head, eyes on the ceiling beams. He listened to the wind shift outside, the snow hush against the walls. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't thinking of what he'd lost. He was thinking of what had found him. The snow held through the week, light and dry, blanketing the ridge but never enough to trap them. Zadie had taken to the rhythm of the place without asking much, hauling water, mending seams with thread from Thatcher's kit, learning the cabin's small rituals without breaking its silence. One afternoon, she was oiling the hinges on the storage chest when she paused, eyes narrowing at a stack of folded canvas tucked beneath old pelts. She pulled it free, revealing a weathered map, creased and softened by years of handling. Its corners were frayed and the ink had faded in places, but the hand-drawn trails and notes were careful, precise. She looked up. Did you draw this? Thatcher glanced over from where he was sharpening a blade on the porch. I did. Zadie smoothed the map across her lap. You've marked campsites, water lines, even where chokecherries grow. I spent 2 summers mapping the range. Needed to know what could keep a man alive if he got caught out. She traced a ridge with her thumb. Ever think about publishing it? He leaned against the doorframe, wiping the blade with a cloth. No, it's not meant for profit. Her voice softened. Then what is it meant for? He stepped inside, hung the knife from a wooden peg. A man ought to leave something behind that's useful. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You already have. He didn't speak, but the way his jaw shifted said enough. She folded the map gently and slid it back beneath the pelts. That night, she found him at the edge of the clearing, his coat dusted with snow, eyes on the stars. She stepped up beside him, wrapping her arms across her chest. I never saw this many stars in town, she said. They always been there. Just easier to forget them when there's too much light. Zadie tilted her head back, breath fogging. There's comfort in knowing the sky stays the same. He looked down at her, his voice quiet. That what you're hoping for? Something that doesn't change. She met his gaze. I used to think change was what I needed most. Now, I'm not sure. Maybe I just want to belong somewhere that doesn't ask me to disappear. Thatcher didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a compass, its brass lid worn smooth. He pressed it into her hand. She turned it over. This yours? Was, since I was a boy. She looked up. Why give it to me? He held her gaze. So you've got something that points true when things turn uncertain. Her fingers closed over it slowly, like she understood the weight of that gift without needing to say so. The next morning, she didn't come in from the creek at her usual time. Thatcher tossed another log on the fire, waited, then pulled on his coat and headed out. He found her kneeling by the bank, hands in the icy water, face pale. You all right? Zadie nodded but didn't rise. There's a trout just under the shelf. I thought I could catch it bare-handed. He crouched beside her, scanning the water. You'll freeze your fingers before it comes close. I know, she whispered. But for a moment it felt like I could do something I hadn't been taught. Something just mine. He crouched with her in silence, the current murmuring around them. Then, without a word, he reached his hand in beside hers. Together they waited motionless. The fish never surfaced. But when they stood, their hands brushed and neither pulled away. Back at the cabin, she warmed her fingers by the fire while he set out a pan of beans and dried venison. As they ate, she watched the wood crackle, then said, What would you do if I asked to stay? He didn't look up right away. When he did, his eyes were steady. I'd build you a proper bed. Clear the second shelf for your things. And ask if you'd take a walk with me come spring, see where the chokecherries bloom. Zadie's fingers curled around the tin cup. Her voice was quiet, but sure. Then I'll ask. They didn't speak after that. Didn't need to. When she rose to clear the dishes, he reached out and took her hand, calloused palm closing over hers. She turned toward him, and the look they shared was neither hurried nor uncertain. It was something settled, earned, and when she leaned in, and he met her without hesitation, it felt not like an ending or even a beginning, but a place they'd both been walking toward, each from their own side of the wilderness. The wind shifted westward by midweek, carrying the scent of thawing soil beneath the snow. Patches of brown earth showed along the cabin's southern wall where the sun lingered longest, and the firs outside shed their white coats branch by branch. The quiet between Thatcher and Zadie had grown companionable, marked more by presence than necessity. He was sorting rabbit pelts by the work table when she stepped in from the lean-to, arms dusted with sawdust. "I finished fitting the shelf," she said, brushing her hands on her trousers. "Used the short planks you had stacked by the water barrel." He nodded without looking up. "Smart. That was dry enough to hold." Zadie leaned against the doorframe, watching him trim the edge of a hide with controlled movements. "You ever sell to traders, or just keep what you need?" "Once a season. I bring what's worth hauling into Helena. Tanner there gives fair weight." Her eyes flicked toward the stacked pelts. "You'd get more coin for these in Missoula. I'd get more trouble, too." He set down the blade. "I've had enough of men who wear polish to cover rot." Zadie stepped closer, reaching out to run her fingers over the soft edge of the rabbit fur. "You ever think about what you'd do if you stopped trapping?" "I don't sit idle. That's not what I asked." He looked at her then, eyes steady. "I'd build something, maybe a stone house down near the river. Land's flatter there, better for planting." She smiled, just a little. "You'd take on a crop?" "I try. Oats or barley. Maybe keep a few hens if I could stand the racket." "You'd need a barn. And a hand who knows how to keep books." She tilted her head. "You think I'm good with numbers? I've seen the way you portion the flour." Zadie's expression softened, but her voice held steady. "You'd build that place alone?" "No," he said without pause. "Not if I had a reason to build it for two." Outside, a hawk cried, circling above the ridge. She turned toward the sound, then back to him. "I want to learn how to shoot," she said. Thatcher raised a brow. "You planning to take up bounty work?" "No," she said, "but I won't be caught helpless again." He studied her for a beat, then nodded once. "Tomorrow, we'll take the small rifle down by the creek. Easier to start with." That night, she didn't go behind the curtain when the fire faded. Instead, she brought the quilt from the cot and spread it beside where he lay near the hearth. He didn't question it, just shifted to make space, and when she eased down beside him, her hand found his without reaching. Neither of them said anything. By morning, the sky had turned a pale, forgiving blue. He led her down the slope, rifle in hand, a tin can swinging from his belt. They practiced near the frozen edge where the trees thinned, the sound of her first shot echoing through the valley. She missed wide. He didn't comment, just steadied her stance, adjusted her grip, and stepped back. The second shot clipped the can. Her breath left her in a cloud. "That felt like something breaking free inside me." Thatcher nodded. "Good. Let it." They stayed until the sun crept over the ridge. When they hiked back, her stride was firmer, her eyes more certain. Inside, she sat at the table while he ladled out broth. "You ever plan on going back east?" she asked. He shook his head. "What's there for me?" "Nothing left for me either," she said. "But I don't feel like I've lost anything." Thatcher set the bowl in front of her, then sat across from her, elbows on the table. "You haven't." Zadie toyed with the edge of the spoon. "If I stayed, I wouldn't want to be just a guest." "You aren't. I mean it. I'd want my hands on whatever we build." "They would be." She looked up. "And you'd let me speak my mind?" "Every time." Zadie reached across the table, fingers brushing his. "Then I'll stay. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this is the first place I've ever felt chosen." His voice was quieter than the wind. "You are." She leaned forward then, not rushed, not uncertain, and kissed him with a steadiness that felt like a promise made beneath sky and pine and time itself. And when they rose the next morning, side by side, the world already felt a little more theirs. The first crocus pushed up through the thawing earth near the south slope, petals trembling in a patch of sun. Thatcher noticed it when he stepped out with the saw, the blade newly sharpened, and stood still a moment before heading for the spruce he'd marked earlier in the season. Zadie was kneeling by the shed, soaking leather with pine resin, her sleeves rolled and face flushed from the wind. She looked up when she caught the sound of his boots crunching through the softened frost. "There's green coming in by the creek," she said. "Low to the ground, but it's there." He nodded. "We'll have to start checking for runoff. That slope's liable to wash if we don't trench it soon." She wiped her hands on a cloth. "I can take the west end. There's still a good spade in the shed. We'll do it together." They crossed the ridge that afternoon, each with a spade and a coil of rope. The ground was softening fast, and the water moved under the crust in quiet rivulets. As they dug, Zadie glanced up at the sun caught between the trees and said, "I used to think spring was just another season. But this year it feels like something earned." Thatcher leaned on the handle of his spade. "That's what it is. Not a gift. A return." They moved in tandem, the trench taking shape as they worked in silence, the kind that had grown between them without effort. It was the rhythm, the agreement of hands and will, that spoke louder than conversation. That night, Zadie brought out a piece of cloth she'd kept tucked beneath her cot. She laid it flat on the table, revealing small stitches in a pattern of pine boughs and twin peaks. "I've been working on it at night," she said. "For the wall, behind the bed." Thatcher studied it carefully. "You stitched the ridge. And the path," she said. "The one we walk when we check the traps." His voice was quiet. "You've marked it like it belongs to you." "It does," she said. "So do you." He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. She stepped into his arms like it was the only place she'd ever meant to go. Later, with the fire low and the quilt around them, she spoke into the hush. "I've been thinking about the land east of the ridge. The soil's darker there. Might hold better for barley." "I've thought that too," he said. "It'll need clearing. I'll take the axe in the morning. You won't be the only one swinging it." She smiled against the curve of his shoulder. "There's a lot we could build. We already are." The days lengthened. They cleared the eastern slope by hand, cutting back saplings and turning thick roots from the earth. Zadie learned the weight of the plow blade and how to read the wind before it turned. Thatcher began shaping lumber for a new addition, the kind that would hold a cradle one day, though neither of them spoke the word aloud. One afternoon, as they measured the beam for the new doorway, a rider came up the ridge. His coat was dusty and his gelding tired, but the man's voice was polite when he asked for water. Thatcher brought it without pause. The man drank, then looked to Zadie. "You're Zadie Northwood?" She didn't move. "I am," she said. "I was asked to find you. Your father passed last month. Fever took him in Butte. He left no will. I was hired by a cousin of yours to try and find you. He says the estate's yours now, what's left of it." Zadie's expression didn't change. "There's nothing I want from that life." The rider inclined his head. "Didn't figure there would be. Just doing my part." Thatcher saw the letter the man handed her. She folded it without reading, set it on the mantel, and didn't pick it up again. That night, she burned it in the stove without a word. Spring turned to early summer. The barley sprouted in neat rows beside the cabin, and the sound of the river grew louder as the melt fed its banks. Zadie painted the door blue with a mix of lye and powder she'd bartered from a traveling peddler. Thatcher carved their initials into the lintel above it, not with any ceremony, but with a steadiness that made her pause when she saw it. One morning, she reached across the table and took his hand. "We should marry." His eyes held hers. "We already have in every way that matters." "I want it said aloud," she replied. "With our feet in the dirt and the wind hearing it." They exchanged vows beneath the same fir where he'd first taught her to steady her aim. No preacher, no voices but their own. The forest bore witness, and the hawk wheeled overhead. That night, they stood on the porch, the barley fields pale gold in moonlight. Zadie leaned into him. "I never thought peace would feel like work and dirt and splinters." "It does," he said. "Because it's real." She looked up. "And tomorrow?" "Same as today. Yours and mine." Years passed quietly. They built a shed for tools, then a second room when the need came. They never returned east, never sent word. The land kept them busy, and each season brought fresh tasks: canning, fencing, mending, planting. Their hands aged with the work, but their eyes never lost the way they looked at each other. Some evenings, when the sun dipped low and the barley bowed in the wind, they sat side by side on the porch steps and said nothing at all. Because nothing needed saying. Their life was not loud. It was not easy. But it was theirs. And it was full.